Hello and welcome. My name is Gerd Mellach. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is episode 15 of our podcast at SEOleverage.com. I'm really honored today to welcome the inventor of link research tools, Link Detox, speaker and author Christoph Cemper to the show. Welcome, Christoph.
Hi, Gerd.
Thank you so much for taking the time. I would like to start off by letting people know who might not know link research tools directly. This is the main reference tool. I would say every SEO in the industry knows what link research tools is. Mm-hmm. Every SEO who knows what they are doing is going to say link research tools is the best link and backlink analysis tool. There's just no way around it. Mm-hmm. I would want to just briefly ask you to give us a little bit about background about your history. What's the history of link research tools? Mm-hmm. How did it start? Where are we now?
Okay, so back in the day, I used to be, I mean, I'm not starting programming as a teenager, but I used to have Cemper.com as a link building agency, and we were in the need for good data for links. And back then, the problem, like today, was that no comprehensive data set was available. So, of course, back in 2027, 28, tools were less matured. We didn't have Ahrefs, we didn't have SEMrush. They were called SEO Quake back then, and actually motivated me to write my own stuff because all of these tools, Moz was there, Systrix was there, provided a piece of the puzzle. I had a little bit of data, and I remember well how I paid my first link builder, a student, and she was working with that data. And then she came to me and said, I cannot get these links because these pages are not there. I screened for prospects based on the data I got in my Excel sheet. And then I gave it to her. And after some hours, she came back and said, I cannot build that link. And that's where I realized I need a validation of data. All these tools are great and they are great data sources. Ahrefs is not a competition by the data source. SEMrush is not a competition by the data source. And we take in link research tools everything together, recrawl it and validate it up to the minute. This was the original pain I solved for myself and many others. Our customers love link research tools for the fact that they cannot see old data. And you have to understand when I say old data, and some of the link databases that you can buy data from, you get up to 5-year-old data. So what's that worth? It's raw data. We call it raw data internally. And link research tool specializes on taking all that data together, combining it to something more useful, being more accurate, more up to date, and then of course processing the knowledge that we try to get out of there. And the best example is Link Detox, where we calculate a risk metric for every link based on all these data points. For every link, that was the second problem. We collected different metrics from SEO Quake and other tools and put it into a spreadsheet. Today, for every link, we got 150 metrics. And with these 150 metrics and the history of those metrics, we can calculate a risk of a link, a power of a link, a trust of a link. And that was the crucial, let's say, foundation to be able to say if a link is helping rankings or not. And people call me a crazy professor or German engineer or overdoing things. But the reality is in 2011, we launched 2012, sorry, Penguin 1, 2012. We launched Link Detox. Not because we built it, but because we had it. And I said, you know what, Tibor, we built this little sales tool where we show them some data, and then they see how much data we have. The truth was that was sufficient. We had everything to fix the penalties, and the rest is history, where we became really popular. But everything was ready by the time, and that's also why we were the first ones to be able to do that and to collect all this data about the penalties. I remember
that moment when you launched Link Detox really well, because I remember thinking these guys were really fast. So there was always this buzz about negative links and what's going to be penalized and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And like this, link research tools had a solution for that. I was like, wow.
Obviously
in the works before that. So you can definitely see you guys have your finger on the pulse of links, link building, link profiles, etc. You know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Interesting for me is I had a conversation a couple of months ago with a consulting client who's part of our Erica program. And at some point in consulting, we get to a point where you say, look, the content is optimized, the internal linking is optimized. The site has a good speed, good user experience, etc. What else can we do? Because we are still not ranking with everything where we want to rank. And then it's really links we know move the needle. Okay.
Yeah.
So this client came back to me and said he's been doing marketing all his life, but not really too much in SEO. And he was like, how is it possible that today, 2021, this was 2020, it was at the end of the year. How is it possible that in 2020, Google still needs links in order to come up with a suitable search result?
A lot of people say, "Oh, Google is so fancy; they build so much stuff." But the reality is, also in 2020, 2021, the Google core algorithm is based on links. That was the one key innovation that Google had, where compared to all the other search engines that were using concepts like TF-IDF and normal text retrieval database, they were analyzing the interlinking, the citations, as you say in the scientific community, and that made Google successful because they could measure relevance. Over the last 20 years, they only added on top of that, or as Google referred to it, as an onion, an algorithmic onion. So, for example, the Penguin algorithm, the Panda algorithms, they were all built to change the results by modifying what that link algorithm had, and they had it on top. And in 2016, they managed to integrate that filter into the core algorithm, which means they were just faster in calculating it. But it's still the link algorithm that tells Google which other websites find that website important. And it is also links, and this is important to understand. It's not just about the links that are in the content. It's people reading that content and clicking on it to the other. So we're not talking about just an algorithm, some program that Google built. We're talking about how the web works. So the web works by people reading stuff, clicking there, and being somewhere else. Some people, really go crazy and say, "Oh, every link has to have traffic." Yes, but not like 1,000 visitors from one referral link. The way the web works is its content linked together. That is the idea of the hypertext and hyperlinks and hypermedia. Back then, it was a really big deal, in the 90s when you had a video playing somewhere.
Probably took a long time to download. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You would call in the night to download it later when the phone rates are cheaper or something like that. Exactly. But the web works like that, and that's why Google needs links. Not because they need it for ranking, because the web works like that. And if you want to understand how people consume content, you have to follow that. And of course, they got Google DNS, they got Google Chrome browser with 65%, they got all these services, infrastructure services. Some of them are even provided for free, like the DNS. And they can analyze traffic patterns, downstream, upstream, everything with that. In addition to, but if you look at DNS traffic, you only get this on a host level, on a domain level. So it's not as precise as going page to page. And yeah, watching people's moves in Google Chrome and Google Analytics is a privacy issue, always has been, and even more so. And links are just a too strong signal. And I remember many years ago, they announced that they would try to not use links, and then did not even do it. And there was this big story about Yandex many years ago who said they don't use any links because they got so many spam links. And a couple of months later, and nobody talked about that, they also announced, "Oh, we put it back in place." So for a whole year, 2014, I think, half of Germany thought, "Oh, if Yandex doesn't need links, then Google doesn't need links because Google is much cooler." But the reality is, the Yandex experiment was a big fail. And even today, hyperlinking is the difference between, the web that we consume and a stupid newsfeed. When you go on Facebook, there are no links. You get this pre-chewed. You get stuff presented. You can scroll and scroll and scroll, and eventually you find something funny, a cat video here, or an announcement from Christoph and that. But that's not the web. That's you can do that completely drunk and still consume content. If Google would remove links, they would have something like that. Imagine opening Google and just surfing random websites. that's terrible. And so, besides all this, let's say, high level thoughts on links, it's Google who says that they need links, and they keep repeating that, and said Gary Ellis said ranking without links is really, really hard, and we made T-shirts about that with him as a comic character, and he didn't like that too much, but that's how it is.
It's just the reality. We're just starting with a new client who came in last week, and you see they have been trying putting out stuff, putting out content, etc.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's understandable. The way I explain it is that Google essentially doesn't trust the new site. They want to keep their users happy, so they don't send traffic to a new site. Makes sense. Links are trust signals. And it's funny. Yeah. It's funny that how some things in SEO move so fast. And then there are other things where I say, okay, I've started SEO on a very low level 19 years ago, 20 years ago. So I did web design, web programming, everything around online marketing essentially, and then slowly build up SEO to a state where we don't do anything else right now anymore.
Yeah.
But it's funny that we have seen everything from like people putting white text on white background and got their site ranking to all the algorithm updates, detox and everything. And people ask me, how can you keep track of SEO? And I'm like, there are some things that really move fast. So I think content, user experience, there's a lot of movement in there. But then there are just things where I say 15 years ago, I probably did the same thing. So 15 years ago, 10 years ago, I remember talking to clients and look, we are not only placing a link. So you have one of 250 links we build every month back to your site. But we do this link. We invest a lot of effort into content creation. So this link, then this content itself can rank and also drive traffic. This was 10 years ago, a car classified portal, for example. I remember the site very well. So it's some things really don't change so much after all.
No, it's links drive rankings. And that is a major thing to understand. It's the main criteria. So everything on top, when we talk about user experience, when we talk about page load times, that is user experience, and that makes sense. Search engine, I remember Google search results, also on my own sites, my own affiliate sites, ranking number 1 and not responding, throwing either, 20-second timeout or even server errors. I had that. I had my server errors, my PHP server errors indexed in Google all over the place because they hit so hard on the servers. And back then, the only mistake I made is I tried to solve this with caching and all sorts of fancy algorithms instead of just buying more servers to make more money. Yep. That was stupid from my point of view, but I'm a developer also.
Inside you.
That's a programmer in me. But back then, it was really unbearable what Google would do to and Yahoo and MSN, Bing back then. What they would do to a server. So I had many different websites on the same server, different IPs and everything. So they had no idea to understand that it's the same server that responded 30 seconds. Right. And that again is a modifier to the rankings. You have a number 1 ranking, and if that number 1 ranking doesn't come back fast enough for the user, it cannot be number 1. And this is what they added. They improved it. But the original ranking criteria, as people call it, they didn't go away. And even Google went on stage saying, Andrea Lippertsev said, it's content and links. What do you want from me? It's content and links. That's what we have. We don't have anything else. And he wasn't a spokesman for Google very long because he said this just like I did, like really annoyed, like, what the hell do you want from me? But that was, I think, 2017. And he spoke with a developer heart as well. Because what else is there? You want to really believe, some people believe that Google looks at social signals. Take a third-party company like Facebook, as dangerous as Facebook, as unstable and volatile as Twitter, and take their data for their own rankings. No, certainly not. I mean, they tried Google Plus, but really they failed to incorporate social signals to a level that it really impacts rankings. And,
I remember when Facebook got really big, everybody was saying, okay, we are not going to do searches on Google anymore. We're going to search for the local plumber in Facebook, and just based on all the engagement this plumber is going to have on Facebook and the recommendations, we're going to find whatever we're looking for. This obviously did not happen. I really want to summarize what you said so far, which is really interesting. So you say links are at the core of Google's algorithm. they just build on top of this. I think this is really important because people expect that everything is shifting on Google. So it's everything is shifting. So social media is there. Is now we have Clubhouse, and Google is going to rebuild everything based on Clubhouse, and then we have I don't know what.
Yeah,
but it's really layers that are built on top of it to further refine what is a valid search result, so to speak.
Exactly. Yeah. Think about, one of the first filters was built by Matt Cutts, the safe search filter. That's, I think, easiest to understand. You have 1 million search results, and the objective for the machine is to find out those search results that are not suitable for adults, for kids. So to find all the porn. And so you have 1 million results, and the algorithm needs to take out 500,000, half of that, which is porn. That's it, a filter. And another filter would be a simple penalty. That has been around for 20 years. Google penalties, removal of websites happened forever. Before Penguin, before Panda, before all these, before they had names. Like now, we don't have names for updates anymore, just the co-update. And so that always had the goal to remove non-suitable, non-appropriate results from the original result set, and that on and on. And of course, you can refine it forever. I mean, you have legal, you have copyright, you have privacy issues, exposed private data, credit card data. All these things are filters that nobody talks about. But it's always the same method, and I don't see how that would change fundamentally. It doesn't. So when we talk about optimizing Facebook, trying to get your own posts organically to appear more often in newsfeed of people, it's not even ranking, it's exposure. Well, that's a different ballgame. It's not the web. Facebook is not the web. It's an app where you can scroll forever. It's an endless scroller. And Google manages something very different. They manage data. They crawl books, they crawl websites, and that is something from very different from the structure. Everything social media is more like a stream. Twitter, Insta, Facebook, TikTok, 15 seconds per random if you want. So, and you cannot apply the concepts of the one to the other just because the search engine and the web works well today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also, I really very often refer to search marketing really as being like a special moment. So I'm standing in a line at a Starbucks or something like that, scrolling my feed. This is not necessarily the best moment for me to consume an article about leak detox or whatever.
Yeah.
But if I'm sitting down, I open up Google, I search for what is the latest information about disavowing links. We're going to talk about this in a moment. Then I'm ready to dedicate a few minutes of my time to this piece of content. So it makes sense that also the algorithm presenting me with certain pieces of content is a different one because I'm in a completely different state. We have the opposite extreme with zero-click searches, with Google showing the answer directly, which obviously is great for users, not so great for websites. But obviously, if I want to know the height of the Eiffel Tower, it's not really necessary for me to read an entire article and find out where they show this information. Or if I want to know how to say hello in Spanish, I can probably do with Google's answer, and that's great. They're doing a great service there. There are not so positive points about this. We obviously can talk about it in another call. You were mentioning Google algorithm updates. We had the last core update in December. We had the last core update in May. Have you seen from your experience, you obviously have a really good big data set, have you seen any impact on how Google treats links in the past year?
So what was due this year? What was due in 2020? What was the rollout of the no-follow indexing? So in September 2019, they pushed out overnight the realization, the statement that they will also count no-follow links if they feel like to, depending on. And that just was confirming what I've seen for many years before. But they put it in writing. Yes, we will look at no-follow links. So be careful. And if you have paid links, better mark them as sponsored links. And if you have comment links, better mark them as UGC. So they said, we take this serious now. which I think they did for many years before, but that's official. The nofollow tag was also used, or is still used, by many websites for crawl optimizations. There was a huge campaign or a huge trend for crawl budget optimization. So even if you only have 30 pages on your website, it was very important to optimize how the bot crawled, which it really isn't. If you have 30 million, we can start talking, maybe 3 million. But a nofollow was a trick or a hack that even Google recommended that you could use to influence how the bot crawls your website. And they said, we're going to change that in March 2020. They didn't change that in March 2020, but in May, we had a core update. And the only thing that makes sense to me is that this is a delayed rollout of this nofollow indexing, which means that all websites that use nofollow to exclude terms pages, privacy pages, order forms or sign-in forms, which was the recommended way for years, they suddenly faced a completely different distribution of link equity, of link juice in the website. So that was the moment when the internal page ranks, as people refer to it, inside Google changed for websites. And of course, if the page ranks inside a website change, then the power of pages change. So there were many crazy changes that are not even we cannot even report on that. Not even Google has a pre-calculated answer to that, because what they just did is they changed the rule of how crawling works, of how PageRank calculation works. And when I say PageRank, I don't mean the green toolbar PageRank that we had for many years. I mean Google's internal measurement for the strength of links. They have something there, and it's not what we had public, but they need to calculate that. And the PageRank pattern is old and very different today, I guess, but they need to calculate the strength and the trust for every link, just like Link Research Tool does as well. And if you change the rule of which links to follow, and I wrote a huge article about which cases that might result in, which special cases, then the rankings change all over the web. And this is what we saw. So it doesn't mean that links are more important or less important, or that they don't work or work again. It's just they work different strength. And this is, for me, and it's interesting in terms of everything related to hyperlinks, the one major change. This was the one major change that Google did. After 15 years, they introduced the nofollow tag in 2003. This is where the calculation of the link graph changed. And then in 2019, 16 years later, they changed that. That is a big change. Few people are talking about that. But compared to the filters that we had before, this now is really a core update. The calculation of every single link changed with that. And we still see the ripple effects of that. Google still probably hasn't recrawled their whole index, the whole web. Recrawling the whole web is not easy, it's not fast. And also Google has, this is why we use Link Detox Boost to force them to crawl some websites. Crawling, let's say, weak websites or spammy websites is not something they do often. Why? Because they're not important to Google. So we still see fluctuations in the link graph and in the rankings. And when people have a big problem understanding what happens in the core updates, and Google doesn't want to say, it's really that they cannot say. Because if they would reveal more about the algorithm than they would like. And they did that in the past more and more. And then there's Christoph listening to everything and testing. And Google is not interested in giving us a real clue about what they're doing, whatever you may think. Mm-hmm. So they're interested in having websites fast, very fast now with Core Vitals, so they can crawl the web better. So they can get a complete recrawl, a complete coverage faster. That's what they're after. That's really it. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Now links, we said links are in general a trust signal. But we have come to, you mentioned penalties already. Links can be harmful as well. And this is a very important point I would want to discuss with you.
Yeah.
You're obviously the expert in this area here. What makes a link harmful?
What you have to know is that until 2012, all the links that are harmful on a scale from 1 to 100 were just ignored by Google. It was very, very hard to get a penalty. So they had quality criteria back then, as they have now. One criteria is a simple network pattern. If there is a certain network pattern that identifies many websites belonging to a link scheme, to a link network, then they see someone is trying to mess with us. And this is not one link. Link networks mean that on the link graph, there are dozens or hundreds of links coming from suspicious places or even toxic places. And Google tries to find out, did they manipulate me? Give you a simple example. Every day I get 10 emails with people offering me to buy links, and they send me a list of those domains where I can buy. Guess what? I'm getting these, Google gets these, and we're doing our training in our system. Google has this all way better automated than we, but if you have a seed set, a trust rank calculation works just like that in the positive way. The positive trust rank takes a lot of reputable sites like BBC and CNN and real no nonsense, no bullshit websites, and wherever they link to gets trusted, and again, where those websites link to gets trusted. And the spam calculation works in the opposite way. You have a seed of link sellers. They are selling links. They were caught for selling links. They are offering links. For instance, the Globe is offering links to be purchased. A very annoying example that is very special. But buying a link from a network where other people buy links is one of the very critical parts where you have to be very careful, because once you're in bed with other link buyers, if they get caught, you get caught too. And I wrote articles and made videos about this forward and backward analysis to find patterns like that. And Google does just like that. And in Link Detox, we also do apply similar methods to find patterns. So when you think about that, that's probably the most critical element. People were caught link spamming, buying links on very simple article directories, for example, or link directories. Those were used for many years, and they worked. Because out of 10 links, maybe one was okay and 9 were ignored. And now we're talking about balances. If you have 100 links and 10 of them are bad, that's okay. You may want to clean that up. If you have 100 links and 90 of them are bad, it's overweighted, toxic, and disbalanced. It gets out of balance. And so this is what Google is looking at. They're not looking at one link. So if someone wants to do negative SEO to one of your clients, and the client has 1 million links, and they take 100,000 spammy links, okay, let those 100,000 links be placed, be indexed, be crawled, and then be as strong and effective as the existing links. So that's really hard. The problem is really with the smaller businesses. If you have a small business, if you have a website and you have a couple hundred links, you're very vulnerable to attacks like that. And attacks could happen from competitors that try to just make you drop in rankings, because then they would go up. But there are also automated schemes like the Globe spam, where you are just part of some lists of domains and should not, maybe not even potentially harmed, but you are harmed. So there are some people that say, oh, this cannot be okay, this cannot be legal. How can someone else do all of this and then harm my rankings? And the reality is, it is, because it's possible. And Google doesn't care. It's not their business. If you rank or not, it's not their problem, it's your problem. Actually, if you don't rank, you are more likely to buy AdWords. Nobody will ever go on stage and say, "Oh, we don't care about that." Of course, they care about quality. But what I also say is you need to maintain your website. You need to maintain your backlink profile. If you feel like you have a lot of bad links that you don't feel good about it, then disavow them. This is why the disavow tool has been around for 9 years now. And it was just recently migrated to the new Search Console. Yeah. So, and these bad links are, so number one, they are sometimes done by SEOs that are doing it wrong. They're sometimes a thing of the past that needs to be cleaned up, but they could happen anytime again. So these days it's actually cheaper to harm a website in rankings with spammy paid links than to help it. So if your competitor goes and buys links for you, that's really nasty, because those are links that they don't look too spammy, too crappy to scraper link style. They look like you try to manipulate, and Google has no way of telling.
I've seen a really nasty example here. There was, I think, it's like a plumber in Sydney, and they bought links for him as if he was from Ottawa, Canada. So just to really confuse Google enough, they didn't even want to harm it. They just wanted to confuse their targeting.
Yeah.
So this is essentially what suddenly then brought them out of shape.
Yeah.
And just made sure Google got it confused enough to lower the Sydney ranking because something didn't add up anymore.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, exactly. So a similar example of a problematic link attack would be if you get a lot of links from porn websites. If 90% of your links are suddenly from adult content, we had cases where the website was then put into the safe search filter. And that means that a lot of customers who have this enabled by default will just not see your site. You're removed from the filter. Even worse than that, and this is one of the most critical elements that we always highlight in link research tools on top, are virus or malware links. If you have enough links from websites that are hijacked or have virus and malware on them, then you are also flagged as a suspicious or compromised result. And these databases that flag you, they are not even owned by Google. So for malware and virus, they collaborate with other, virus program distributors. And getting off those lists is really painful. If you think Google penalties are painful, try getting off a virus list. And those are the things that people usually don't talk about because it's not a pleasant topic in general, but also because it does not happen that often. It does not happen because it takes money. It takes effort. So that plumber guy, he probably, annoyed someone really, really bad. But I have a hard time. Well, I don't know that specific area. Maybe some emergency plumbers, where you pay for emergency plumbing $1,000 for him coming 24/7. Maybe that, yeah. But industries where that happens is usually industries with very high cost per click.
Yeah, we've seen this in tourism and finance and in other places as well.
Yeah, the lawyers.
For us, it's just really important. We have a framework built. We call this Erica. And the I in Erica stands for interlinking, what I call this. This is internal and external links, where I try to make sure people just understand that it's important to get an idea what links come to your site, because this is exactly what most site owners completely ignore. They check their rankings, they check their content, they check their traffic, they might check their conversions, many don't.
Yeah.
But they completely ignore what links point to their site, apart from the links they build themselves or they buy themselves.
Yeah.
So this is where I just grab people every couple of weeks and show them exactly what links are pointing to their site. Just to make sure that we're on the same page. We know, is there anything spammy going on? Is there any tech going on? We just had a tourism client being attacked. We said, no, let's do a disavow again because somebody's playing with you again. But they really don't have this on their radar. This is where I think it's just important to revisit the link profile in general, but also on a regular basis, at least. I mean, many of my clients at least have Ahrefs, SEMrush, anything, whatever tool they have for a start, just to check out what those tools tell them, what Google Search Console tells them. They obviously don't have a similar data set, but at least they might see a sudden spike, and then they can then engage with an SEO firm or with someone to take a closer look and really analyze what's going on there. You see this all the time. You see this all the time.
Yeah, exactly. It's also tough because Google doesn't talk about it. So if Google doesn't talk about it, it's not important. They only talk about the stuff that is important, right? A fast website. Yeah, so Google can crawl a website faster. Even faster website. So Google can crawl a website even faster. That's important to Google. They only have a very basic functionality to look at some links of a website, which is useful in Google Search Console. We take that out. But just to give you an idea, the link data that we get there is usually between 1% and 5% of the link data.
Right.
Sometimes it's 10% for smaller websites. And it's really useful to have that information because some negative SEO tags are done in a way that search engines can see the links. And, typical bots cannot see them. So a lot of SEOs, for example, block bots for Ahrefs and SEMrush, so they are not allowed to crawl the website based on the robots.txt standard. We don't use the robots.txt standard, so we crawl a lot more, and find more links. But there are very fancy technical ways to show links only to specific Google data centers. And those type of links are the nastiest one. If you have links like that only show up in Google Search Console, something is cooking that is not good. And then you can say you have a negative SEO attack or someone trying to do that. Sometimes it just starts with testing a little bit, but that should make you cautious.
Yeah, it's essentially trying to disavow something you can't see, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Aiming at a moving target you can't even see.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
right.
And people, experts in negative SEO are usually veterans like me that have been in the business for many, 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 many years and are very technical, and that's not something that is to take lightly.
How would a site owner know that potentially there is this penalty going on? We know there are manual penalties, but there are algorithmic penalties.
Yeah.
How would a site owner know they might be being penalized at a certain moment?
Well, number one, we have the luxury of Google Search Console telling us. Google really implemented emails saying, hey, you got a penalty. If people hate that, imagine being me in 2003, we had nothing like that. We didn't even know what was going on. The website didn't receive any more traffic. It wasn't listed in Google. So this is what you can check second. If you suddenly stop getting orders, if you stop getting visitors, stop getting, comments, then something's wrong, and you should look at your analytics setup. But you can also look at SEO tools like Systrix or SEMrush or Ahrefs if you have them, or call your agency to see if there is a major impact in the rankings. Have to be careful though, because for many websites, the key traffic is not what these tools show. They show you more the head terms, let's say the more generic words. And if you drop for a generic word, doesn't mean you dropped for the long tail phrases. The long tail phrases are those that make the money. So sometimes a drop in visibility, as they call it often, is not necessarily a drop in traffic, in converting traffic. But it's a signal. And just yesterday, I've had a private site clinic with a guy losing all of his traffic, like all. And then you need to check. Of course, for these signals, you need to check in your backlink profile where we found something, but you also need to check the website. And in that case, it was yet again a WordPress with some crazy multilingual plugin, with some well-known SEO plugin, and they didn't play well together. And redirects were completely messed up on that site, and all the content was just redirected to images. Yeah, there you go. Good luck with your free website CMS system with your cheap hosting and some plugin from some other guy who doesn't even know that you use that other plugin, and then you have some software chaos essentially. And that was the case here. So this is why you need a trusted provider who takes care of your websites. Free is not free. A free WordPress is not free. It causes a lot of trouble. Not in the first month, not in the second month, but if you maintain a WordPress instance for 10 years, you have problems. I can tell you, I've been there.
After 10 years, you probably have been through a few hack attacks and
exactly.
And
exactly. Yeah.
I remember many years we were using a system hardly anybody used, which was called Easy Publish, which was essentially a content management system more for enterprises, but they had like a community version. I was using that one for my websites back then. And I remember sites not being touched in 6 years, no update, no batch, no anything. And they didn't have a single hacking attempt. It was just not, it's very often people go for the system that's used the most because it's going to be easy to find a program. It's going to be easy you have all the plugins. You don't need to program anything. But obviously the system used the most is the most attractive target for hackers. It's like who really has an antivirus system on their Mac? Probably hardly anybody. Because it's apparently there are viruses for Mac, but it's not something people would be focusing on if they want to attack computers, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and the same is true here. WordPress is a nice system, but it is a complex system. And complexity that you have in WordPress these days with all the speed optimization plugins is crazy. So if you have a very big car, it needs a strong engine. Not to move you around, to move the big car around. And that's the case with WordPress. You need a freaking huge server to host a WordPress instance that performs well. And then you still need some optimizations because some things are still not built in. It's a CMS system where you still need to install in 2021 a plugin for duplicating an article. Wow. Yeah. So just an example. I recently saw Mario post on Facebook that he managed to optimize his website, and he had a time to interactive of, I think, 1 second for his article. It's just an article, text, no images, nothing. And the question is, what takes 1 second to load of an article of 10 kilobytes? So a lot of people are now looking into alternatives that don't have that complexity. And the reality is, most websites don't have any complexity. Most websites have, let's say, 100 blog posts, maybe 200 articles, static. You write them and then they stay there. And then you have an About Us page, you have a team page, you have a contact form. It's all static. Of course, you write an article every week, or maybe you write 10 articles a week, but they stay there. It's not a dynamic system like a forum. It's not like fluctuating like Facebook, changing every second. So you do not need a database to serve that. And once you get to that point, you realize, we can just generate HTML files.
There's even a plugin for that. I tested it once where you can install a plugin on WordPress to produce HTML. So where you essentially you have your administration of WordPress. I don't think it works with any page builders anyway, but you essentially can have WordPress generate static HTML files so they get rendered fast, indexed fast, etc. I think it's probably somewhere the future might be there, I think, and then you get rid of a lot of hacking attempts.
Yeah, well, those cache plugins have always been around to generate HTML. But if everything is on the same server, I can still hack your database. The idea about static site generators like Hugo or Gatsby, for example, is to give it to a distribution network like Netlify, and then you have HTML files not sitting on any server everywhere. It's on Cloudflare or Amazon CDN right at the edge. So if I'm in Vienna and I load that website, I'll load it from next door, not from your server in Spain or in California. So there is not even a server to be attacked. That content is just distributed. And yesterday I just looked that up. They give you a free hosting, free tier for up to 100 gigabytes of traffic.
Interesting. Yeah, I think the future definitely goes there. If you want more speed, more web vitals, more speed, more faster responses, etc., I think we're definitely going to go back to static delivery at some point. Databases are just really slow. We see this all the time, especially when sites have been growing over time, and we see a slow response. I had this on a language learning site, I think, where the site was extremely slow, and it was just a database cleanup. There was no plugin for cleanup. They had 28 plugins for everything else. but there was no plugin that would do a database cleanup and remove all the versions and drafts and I don't know what. So it was removing those, and the site got, I think, a second or 2 seconds faster.
Yeah, but the version control is something. For instance, hosting companies like WP Engine, they disable revisioning, they disable versioning because it's slowing WordPress down so much. But a much bigger question is, why on earth does the CMS have its own version control? We got Git and Mercurial that are used to build software with trillions of lines of code. So a static website generator, for instance, uses that as well. Established version control with all the fancy features that you can imagine that is used to build Linux and Windows and NASA software. Why invent the wheel? And this is another, we don't need that approach in the CMS world, and works like a charm, actually.
I want to make sure we don't continue too long to nerd out. I really love this topic. into my programming brain and love this kind of discussion. For our audience, I think there was one more question. I want to be conscious of the time. I really appreciate your time. You very often we hear things about mentions, brands being mentioned but not linked. What do you think? Is this valuable? Is Google taking this into account? Is it worth the effort reaching out to the sites and get really a link placed? Is Google taking into account that brands get mentioned a lot, and so the site behind the brand might be more important? What's your take on this?
Brand mentions have always been important because they create brand traffic. And brand traffic creates links. If you have a lot of people searching for your brand comes up more often, is being clicked on more often. So that's an indirect ranking factor, if you want. If there is some body copy that has linkresearchtools.com and a clearly visible domain name, then this is a mention that can be attributed to a domain, which is useful and probably used by Google. But it's not so often that people, use the normal link. I mean, in forums, for example, it is. But the real killer question is, how far are they with their entity mapping? Google entities. It reminds me about Google Plus. They did the Google Plus thing and tried to get a map of everyone, every person, every company, and all that. And they're doing that just again. And so I wrote a book, and so I'm an author entity, and they know Christoph Spaghetti Code, blah blah blah, belongs to Link Research Tools. They know all that. So when they have someone mentioning Link Research Tools, spelled correctly, also with some misspellings, they can connect it. But it's also not so often that happens compared to linking, for example, when people just link to a certain blog post saying a nice tutorial or interesting case study. I have not seen any ranking impact of any brand mentions anywhere just from the link perspective. So if you say, we don't need the link, it's okay if they just mention the name, that's a little bit too hopeful. I was
going to say really, really risking potential link you could get from this site, right?
Yeah. And there is a link building tactic to just look for those mentions and then send them an email to ask for the link.
Exactly. This was what I was heading for. So this is definitely, when there is a brand that has been around for a few years, they probably have quite a few mentions. A quick win can be to reach out to those pages and ask if they could also place a link so people could directly click on the brand name.
Yeah. And sometimes that is really easy. So imagine you have multiple languages, or you change your domain name to something slightly different from www.linkresearchtools.com to smartlinkresearchtools.com. And you just tell them, we want to make sure that your readers hit on the right website. They get the most recent piece, or what you're actually referring to is not here on the homepage because we got so many different products, but the article is about a product by that company that is posted here, and we explain that here. So you may want to link there for better user experience for your readers. Oh, thank you. That's a great idea. Yeah. So it's not, you don't need to chase the links. Think about what the user experience would be. And if a journalist writes about a company and just mentions that company in the context of a product, he just maybe didn't have the time or the knowledge to find a better place to link to. But the web is content and links, and that's I would say after 20 years or so, some journalists get that. There are still discussions in the news community, linking or not, and should we link somewhere? And then the SEOs have a bad rep in some places, but more and more articles just use the web the way it was intended by Tim Berners-Lee and write content with links in it to the right places, so I can research further. So that is really, I would say, one of the most promising link building tactics in general. Just look what you have, who wrote about you, and try to help them make their websites better.
Perfect. Yeah, awesome insights, Christoph. I want to wrap this up here. I think we used enough of your time. I think we've gotten a lot of food for thought for the audience. We've heard about Google still relying on links. We've heard about having different filters, as you explained it really well, where Google's just trying to get better and better in the search result, and not only rely on links, but the fundamental criteria for what should be ranking higher are the links. We need to be careful about what links come to our website. We want to disavow the bad ones. We don't want our website associated with bad link neighborhoods or link networks, as you explained them. Link research tools, I want to stress this, is definitely one of the leading tools there. Especially, I think agencies in general are using link research tools as soon as they can. And I think also there are some automatic detox tools and features out there right now that also make it a very good option for business owners.
Yeah. We try to automate as much as we could, and some of the spam patterns that I talked about are now highlighted because we have such a big, a vast amount of data and experience that we just see things over and over and over again, and we can just tell you. So that's, I would say, advisory automated based on the experience of 9 years of just link detoxing. So yeah.
Should account for something, yeah. Thank you so much, Christoph, for your time. Christoph Cemper on SEOleverage.com. Thank you so much. If
thank you,
the listeners to this show feel they might have an issue with links, definitely get in touch with us at SEOleverage.com. If you want to check this out yourself, check out linkresearchtools.com. Get in touch with Christoph's team and definitely watch your links, watch what links get pointed to your site, and reach out if you need help.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kat.